I was the director of change management for a 53,000 person organization, leading a $12 billion merger, and I was miserable.
Dr. Will Samson, a transformative coach and author, helping people build their self-trust.
But I walked away from that, had the brilliant idea to launch my own business in March of 2020. About 3 weeks after I filed the paperwork for my new business, the whole world shut down for COVID.
Oh shit, he was a high-functioning, burnt-out leader.
The easiest way to identify a high-functioning burnout leader is to go to any company's C-suite webpage and recognize that at least a third to a half of them fall into that category.
Would you say there are certain signs to spot if someone's on the verge of burning out?
Absolutely. And the biggest sign I see is that how important is resilience couldn't be more important today. I think it's the best reflection of emotional intelligence, which I think is the core skill for today's marketplace. The absolute best advice I received in my life was the advice I received in the recovery process, which is
Dr. Will Samson, thank you so much for joining us on the Success School podcast. For those who don't know you, I would love you to just start by sharing a little bit about what is the work that you do, and through that work, what is your main mission?
Yes. So I get to work with individuals and organizations primarily around the topic of resilience. And here's why that matters so much to me. So I have a background in technology, and also in academics. So I have a master's in information systems and then a PhD in sociology. So a lot of my career has been like, how do people in groups use technology? What I realized, though, fairly recently, say over the last 5 to 6 years, is that technology is rarely the barrier to what we're trying to get out of life. It's mostly our internal operating system. It's the internal resilience or lack thereof that really keeps us from what we're doing. So I have a lot of fun spending my day. I work with organizations, usually who are going through big shifts. Right now, I do a lot of work with organizations shifting to AI. So how are we going to use AI? How are we going to integrate it? What's a culture of acceptance for AI? And then I also work with executives and entrepreneurs, helping them sort of rewrite their internal operating system and create a plan for what they want out of life.
So tell us about, obviously you spoke there about resilience, and I'd love if you're happy to share part of your journey. What led you to this being such an important topic for you?
You bet. So June of 2019, I can tell you literally the month and even the date, when I was in the middle. I had reached kind of everything you could reach in my field. So I was the director of change management for a 53,000 person organization, leading a $12 billion merger, and I was miserable. I was like, this can't be what I worked my ass off for. This can't be what I worked so hard for. And it took some courage, but I walked away from that. And spent a little bit of time sort of figuring out what I wanted to do in life, or what I wanted to do next, I should say. And had the brilliant idea to launch my own business in March of 2020. And then if you think about historically, about 3 weeks after I filed the paperwork for my new business, the whole world shut down for COVID.
Oh shit.
and so here was this great new idea to really be working more on culture change within organizations, because I had done a lot of IT change and still do some of that, but realized that culture was the thing that was the differentiator for success. So I was starting this business. The whole world is shutting down. I'm trying to figure out how to pull it together. And through that process, I began to go deep within me. I will say, too, it's an important part of my story is also overcoming addiction. So I was also dealing with a lot of addiction issues at the time. And so I'm sort of newly in recovery. I'm starting my own business, and COVID hits. And so the question is, okay, well, what resources do I have within me to do the work that I need to do. Certainly, I had plenty of really great people around me, but I recognized that, the biggest barrier was not the work or my inability to sort of motivate people outside of me. The biggest barrier was the stories I was telling myself. The biggest barrier were the narratives inside my head. Those of you that are old enough to remember the old movie, the horror movie theme where the caller was inside the house, like they would have the caller would be on the upstairs phone, and you'd pick it up and be horrified. But for most of us, and certainly the executives, the entrepreneurs I coach, and even the organizations I work with, most of the struggles are not, they're no longer technological. They're not necessarily like skill-based, except those emotional internal skills that are required for sort of having a better conversation with ourselves, taking a sense of radical self-ownership for ourselves and the work we do. And then what that gives us the ability to do is to become more interdependent, because when we know who we are and what we do well, and we begin to trust ourselves, and we can actually trust others to work with us as well.
So there's a lot of stuff there that I want to dive into and get the juice out of, because there's some really, really important topics. Just before we do that, there's something I read in your notes about you, and there was a line that really stood out to me that suggested that you was a high functioning, burnt out leader.
Yes.
What does one of them look like, operate like, and what is it like to be one?
So the easiest way to identify a high functioning burned out leader is to go to any company's C-suite team page, web page, and recognize that at least a third to a half of them fall into that category. So many of the executives I work with are, they did the things they needed to do to get to that place, which usually involved some compromise. It involved, meeting meeting standards that weren't their own. So like other people set their standards for them. And so they got to that place, and now they feel trapped. They've done, what they needed to do to get to where they thought they wanted to go. And it's leaving them empty. And so
Is the burnout come from their expectations of what they thought would happen not being met, and it's not the big aha moment, I've arrived, they expected? Or has the burnout come from the process of getting there, or both, I guess?
Oh, it's both. It's definitely both. So the process of getting there, and this is true across the globe. Certainly, I know it better in North America and Western Europe. But to get to a C-suite executive position, or even a senior manager position in most corporations, first of all, you've sort of put aside maybe some of the things that you get energy from, or you're really good at, in order to achieve an outcome that somebody else has set for you. Oftentimes, I meet executives. I coach executives sometimes even in their 60s, but certainly in their 40s and 50s, who usually about the third session, we realize that the script they're living out of is a script they received from their parents, their teachers, their MBA programs, something else. And so oftentimes they're doing what they need to do to get to where they think they want to go, and never really had an honest conversation with themselves. Is this what I desire in life? One of the tools I use in my coaching is called green lights. And if you're familiar with the Japanese concept of ikigai, it's very similar. So a green light is something that you're good at because you've developed the skill around it. You've got social proof for. People have said, oh, you're good at that thing, whatever that is. But there's a really critical third element, which is that you get energy from it. When you do it, you feel, a little more energized than you did before. So for me, one of the reasons I love to speak and teach is because I get a lot of energy from that. And oftentimes you find in executives, they've only been answering the first two questions, which is, did I develop a skill at it, and have other people told me I'm good at it? Not, does it light me up? Is this what I really want to be doing? And I'm not a I'm not a purveyor of false optimism. Like, I don't think we should only do things we like doing. There's a lot, especially being a small business owner, there's a lot of crap that I have to do that I don't want to do. But even for me, like, my metrics are how much of my day and my week and my month and my quarter did I spend in my green lights? And if that's growing, then I feel like I'm succeeding.
Would you say there are certain signs to spot if someone's on the verge of burning out, that if they're not sure, if they think, look, I'm just doing what I need to do, this is just my job, or this is just what it takes to build a business. But is there certain things that, I guess it's about not deterring them from, if they've got a goal and they need to work hard for it, like, we still got to do what we've got to do, but is there signs they can recognize and go, but this is actually now going beyond being productive and it's becoming burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest sign I see is that the executives I work with who are burned out or on the verge of burning out, oftentimes they are looking to something outside of themselves to help them feel complete, whatever, whole, whatever that might be.
Ooh, that's a
Um,
big, so it's almost like it's the pursuit, it's the what you're pursuing is a big part of what creates the burnout, right? Because it's that validation piece, it's the identity of who I become if I achieve this, that's
yeah.
maybe, that's the problematic part, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what they find often, like I mentioned earlier, is that they get to a place they thought they wanted to go, and then they can't even remember why they wanted to get there. And so oftentimes they are looking for someone else or something else to be responsible for this inner feeling of dissatisfaction they have. So they blame it on the market. Or I work with technology executives, CIOs, CTOs a lot. And so they're blaming it on the cost of money or the difficulty attracting and retaining technical talent, constant, technology disruptions like AI. See, if you're looking for somebody outside of yourself or something outside of yourself, that's just another form of addiction. I can tell you from my own story, coming through the addiction recovery process, the biggest lie I told myself was that I needed something from outside of me to come inside of me to be happy. And I find that a lot of burnout executives are doing exactly the same thing. The difference is they've just changed it for quarterly earnings or promotions or whatever. And we see this in the numbers too. Like the average C-level executive now, especially technical executives, are in their positions for about 3.5 years. So they're just bouncing around because they think, well, maybe if I was just somewhere else, I would be more content, I would be more happy. When what's the old motto, wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, you carry your internal narratives with you. And that's really at the heart of burnout. I mean, I've written extensively about it, and there's a number of other ideas that I've put out there. But the heart of the burnout is this belief that somehow there's something outside of me that will fix something inside of me. And that's just not, there's zero evidence for that.
Great. So there's a few things then, that if somebody's listening to this and they're hearing, okay, I think part of what you're saying there is about personal responsibility and not passing the blame and actually looking
Mhm.
within. And because
Mhm.
something that I often say is, it's that kind of thing of, if you're focusing on things without your control, or you're putting the blame on things you can't control, then it's just going to be really disempowering, because you can't change things outside of your control, right? So it's about personal responsibility, it's about looking within, and it's about the stories we tell ourselves about those circumstances, right? How we
Right.
frame it in our own mind. They're the things that are going to determine whether we get stuck or whether we're moving forward. So if somebody's hearing that, but they're like, give me some guidance on this.
Sure.
How can I improve the story I'm saying, I'm telling myself in my mind, and how can I learn to take more personal responsibility? Is there any tangible advice, tips you can give us?
You bet. Yes. And a lot of I want to mention that a lot of my insights on this come from there was a man named Viktor Frankl who was a survivor of Auschwitz, the Auschwitz concentration camps in World War II. And he survived by writing notes on tiny scraps of paper and hiding them in his pajamas, and he carried them out of the concentration camp. And the outcome of those notes became a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And Frankl says that the single greatest human freedom, the one that can never be taken away from us, is the freedom to choose our attitude in any given situation. And so one of the simple tricks that I coach clients to do is take just a piece of paper. It would be 8.5 by 11 in the US, or A4 paper, or just take some copy paper and put it beside your desk, grab a pen, and put a line down the middle. And every thought that comes up, I mean, certainly not, if somebody's talking to you or you're in the middle of a meeting, but as you're going through the day, the thoughts that come up, literally write them down and say, those are mine, those are somebody else's, those are mine, those are somebody else's. And because what you're really doing is you're training your prefrontal cortex to hear the stories that are being brought to you by your amygdala, by your fear centers. Right. So all you're doing is you're training your brain to listen to yourself. And then over time, as you begin to develop kind of a catalog or a list of the stories, what you invariably find is that there's a set of commonalities to them. There are usually 4 or 5 core stories. You can usually find something in your past to explain why those stories exist. And then now you have the possibility of beginning to say, how do I rewrite them? So, a few days of that, even a week or 2 of that, gives you that really solid list. And now you can begin to say, how can I rewrite them? And the other thing you can do as well is you can begin to separate out what's mine and what's somebody else's. And that's so important, because oftentimes, like, one of the ways people rise to the level of executive or even senior management in corporations is they're willing to take on a great deal of responsibility and oftentimes do things that aren't theirs to do. And so they get billed as the overachiever or the superstar, and then they rise the ranks, and then they get to this final place, and they oftentimes have difficulty delegating, because they've been so used to telling themselves this story that they're in charge of everything. And so they can't really they have difficulty building effective teams, delegating things to teams, because they just haven't it's not a story that they're used to telling themselves. And so that process has been very, very helpful.
That's really good. So that's about kind of reframing thoughts, I guess, becoming more aware of thoughts, recognizing what's our thoughts, what aren't, and starting to make a shift there. What about physical things in terms of habits, daily rituals, routines, anything like that, in terms of when you look back on maybe habits you had when you was that high functioning burnout leader versus habits, rituals today? Is there anything like that you could share that you found is really helpful?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a big believer in just sort of the core habits. For me, my cornerstone habit is exercise, because engaging the body early in the day, I find, everybody has their own circadian rhythms, but for me, engaging the body early in the day is absolutely critical, because when we engage our body, we engage all of the chemical processes that are happening in our body. But the approach to that I always suggest for people is, particularly if you start to look at those, and forgive me if you hear some thunderstorm happening in the background, but as you start to look at those stories that you're telling yourself, usually you're going to find, again, there's a set of commonalities, and there's a way to begin to approach those stories and changing those narratives. And so what I encourage people to do is to don't try to create an entire habit stack tomorrow. Start with one habit that you think would be absolutely the most helpful. Develop that consistently, at least 30 days. There's actually, despite the fact that many of us coaches use 30 days, there's nothing actually magical or scientific about 30 days. It just seems to be a well-accepted number. So build one practice, get that going, get that very well established, and then add something to it. And then let me back up to where I started, which is, to me, the big sort of areas of practice are physical, mental, spiritual, and relational. So physical, do something, move your body somehow. Mental, do something to engage your brain. Don't, rather than sort of sitting around watching Netflix or whatever, pick up a book, do something mental to engage your brain. Spiritual, which I'm not talking about religious necessarily, but journaling, other kind of meditation, breath work, other kinds of practices. All of those are absolutely critical. And then finally, relational. It's really critical. Humans are relational animals. We want to be in community. And so finding ways to be in community, I think, is absolutely critical. So those are sort of my, like, find one habit that you think would be most impactful, build that as a cornerstone, or what James Clear calls a keystone habit, and then build a set of other habits around it in those 4 core areas.
Fantastic. All right, let's do resilience now. Let's go in on this subject, because it's my belief that human beings are naturally really bloody resilient. I think, we see it when people are backed into a corner, people fight, or they have the resources that they call upon to get through stuff when they absolutely have to. We saw it in things like, when we had the lockdowns in 2020 and people had to find a new way of making money and pivot and find the strength to do something, leave that job that they might have wanted to leave for years, and suddenly they had to. Now they suddenly start a business and they make a lot of money, and it's like, oh, you could have always done that. It's the same with relationships, right? People stay in relationships. They're not happy for decades, some of them, because of fear of being single, being alone, or could I find anybody else? But actually that partner walks out on them, suddenly they don't die. They actually can cope on their own. They do survive. It's usually when we're forced to call upon resilience, we do find it, but quite often we don't. And I've got sort of some thoughts around. There's a lot of narratives out there around mental health and empathy and sympathy and listening to emotions, which I think are really positive, and they're brilliant. And like all positive movements, if we go too far, we can start to then demonize resilience and go, if you don't want to show up today, don't have another day off. But you've had 10 weeks off, love. Like, let's get back to it, kind of thing, right? That's my thoughts on it. What's your thoughts on resilience, the importance of resilience, and how we build it and start to tap into it more?
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of work backwards on those. So first of all, how important is resilience? Couldn't be more important today. It is literally, I think it's the best reflection of emotional intelligence, which I think is the core skill for today's marketplace. And so, first of all, if you look at what's happening politically, economically, the world just seems to be in chaos. I know I'm speaking as an American and we're causing a lot of it, but the world is chaotic. And then, of course, you throw in other factors, technology and disruptive technologies. There's a big demographic component to it. This is more true in America, but it's true globally. We made more baby boomers than we made Gen Xers. And so the market's going to continue to be disrupted. So in terms of the importance of resilience, I think it is absolutely critical and more so than ever. And not to be too meta about it, but there's a couple historians that wrote a book called The 500-Year Delta, who argued that about every 500 years, human civilization reinvents itself, and we're in that time. So how important is resilience? Number one, in my view, it is, and I know I speak a lot about resilience, but it is, to me, the number one important skill. And then the question of, like, how do we begin to find resilience? And I have found in my own work, in my own research, and in working with clients, probably the 2 most important tools to begin to build resilience. And actually, I'm going to reframe that and say 3 most important tools. One is going back to the narrative work, though, because we really have to understand what is what's a danger and what's a danger I'm telling myself. Like,
Mm.
so often, like, because you're right, we were trained culturally to respond to the saber-toothed tiger and so on. Most of the danger we face today is not that. And so really understanding what's an actual danger versus what's a story I'm telling myself. And then I like to go the other direction, which is sort of to the end of our life and think, what do I desire to leave behind? So one of the tools I have my clients do is to write an obituary. I didn't make up this exercise. It came from Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But we live in a world where we still use the word need a lot. And the reality is most of us just don't need that much. We don't actually need that much. We want things. And so being able to parse the difference between what do I need and what do I actually want? What do I desire? And then what do I desire to create in the world? What do I want to leave behind? What do I want to, what would I like people to say about me
Mm.
at my funeral? Which seems kind of morbid at times, but really, so when we can, so resilience, absolutely critical. And for me, the two biggest steps are being able to parse out what's an actual threat versus what am I telling myself is a threat, which sort of gives me a present way of dealing with resilience. And then you can call it your future self. You can call it, I mean, there's a lot of different models, but saying, what do I actually desire to create in the world? What would I like to be true in, hopefully for me, hopefully 30 or 40 years when I shuffle off this mortal coil? Like, what would I actually like to have left behind? What do I desire to leave? One of the questions I ask myself every day, it's one of my journaling prompts, is how can I be a better ancestor today? And so I think if we live between those tensions, between those two places, I should say, on the one hand, recognizing what's an actual threat to me versus what am I just telling myself is a threat? And then what would I like to leave behind? What are my desires? What do I actually desire to create in the world? I find that in between those two, I can create much more resilience for myself.
What I'm hearing as well is there's an element of focusing on service rather than so much focusing on self. So rather than, oh, I'm scared, I'm fearful, or whatever, or this is going to be tough, this is going to be challenging, we go, but yeah, but what do people need? How can I show up for others? What's the best version of myself going to do for others rather than just making it all about the self? So I think
Absolutely.
there's something in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when we have that attitude, we can also practice interdependence, which is in my model, sort of that third component. Um, we've been trained, especially in America, where we have this just horrible phrase, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, which actually was originally used as a joke, like because you can't do it. So we have this idea, we have this fear of any sense of false dependence on others or needing others. But we live in a world where we need we need each other all the time. I turn on every morning, I turn on the electricity. I have no idea. I mean, I could explain it from a big picture perspective, but I have no idea how that happened. And so, yes, I think service is a part of it, but I think there's also a sense of kind of reality, which is we are here for each other, and we live in a world that wants goodness for us and for each other. And so, if we're willing to understand and accept that paradigm, then I think we can create goodness for ourselves by also creating goodness for others.
Yeah, and you've touched upon this a few times about this idea of, thriving together, interdependence, not trying to be independent. And I think
Mhm.
that that's a really important piece I want people to take away from this conversation, to really like audit your life and think, how much am I on one hand serving others and giving value and being of service? And equally, how much am I, as you mentioned earlier, delegating? Like, you're not going to be the best for every job in a certain mission
Right.
or goal, right? And it's that thing of having the right team, having the right support. I was asked about it earlier about I was on a podcast and I was asked the question, what do you say to someone that needs accountability, that struggles to be self-motivated? I went, go and get some fucking accountability. Like, I pay tens of thousands
Right.
of pounds to have mentors that hold me accountable because I know I'm more
Exactly.
successful when I pay
Yep.
for that mentor to hold me accountable. And there's no shame in that. It's not like, why do you need to pay that
Oh,
money to have a coach? It's like, because I'm better when I have a coach.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what do you say to people on that piece about not being maybe afraid or ashamed to ask for help and actually having the courage to, and whether that be financially investing help and building a team, especially in things like business? What are your sort of thoughts around that?
Yeah. So to me, what you're advocating is not some grand vision or utopian vision. It's actually the way things are.
Mm.
So the everybody thinks of Apple now, and I'm talking to you on an iPhone. I've got a MacBook over here. I am a sold out Apple fanatic. In the late 90s, Steve Jobs couldn't ship product. He was stuck. He was so wrapped up in his own ideas of perfection and what it would take to get things out. And he met a guy named Tim Cook. Tim Cook was an operational genius. Tim Cook finally figured out how to take Johnny Ive, who was already on staff at Apple, but not really being used well, how to take Johnny Ive and combine him with Steve so that Steve could create these beautiful designs, but also convince him to actually ship product. And so Tim Cook, Johnny Ive, and Steve Jobs made for the present success that we think of as Apple computers.
Mm.
I can say with a fair degree of confidence that if Tim Cook had not come along, we might remember Steve Jobs as that guy who had that company once. Um, Instead, we think of him as this brilliant, self-made man. It's not true. It's not accurate. And give me any company, and I can tell you, give me 5 minutes with any corporate leadership, and I can tell you the same story. There are always these people that allowed us to succeed. And so oftentimes the idea of interdependence is perceived as some sort of like highfalutin, high value thing, when in fact it's just simply the way success has always been made. There's always a group of people behind the quote unquote self-made woman or self-made man.
It's like the
And so I think it's just a
definition of,
reflection of the reality.
yeah, I love that. It's basically the definition of company is group of people, right? That's what company is. So
It's,
I love that. And I really want to encourage people to take that on board if they're listening to this right now. The power of community, the power of having your tribe, because we are tribal human beings and we do function better. We all have different strengths that when we come together, that's how we can truly thrive, right? Way more than we ever
Mhm.
will on our own. Will, this is
Absolutely.
brilliant. There's so much I want to talk about. I just want to take a slightly different angle, given your area of expertise and knowledge and experience. Artificial intelligence. Now, this is something for most people they know a bit about. They probably use
Yeah.
Chat GPT now to write most of their emails and like deal with the stuff they don't want to do. Um, Obviously, it's just your opinion. What does the future look like? Where is this going? Is it net positive? Is it net negative? Should we embrace it? Should we be fearful? What's your opinions?
Yeah. So it is a major disruptive technology, and we should think of it like that. That's not saying it's a negative, but we should look historically at all of the disruptive technologies and what they've done. And overwhelmingly, what they have done is change the way we work, but almost always provided new opportunities for new kinds of work, better work, all that. So to me, I've been working with AI for more than 20 years now. And to me, there's going to be some disruption. There's going to be some changes. There's going to be some CEOs and C-level tech executives who think they can replace people, and they're going to try, and some jobs will be replaced. But I also think it is a time of great opportunity. I'm working with a firm right now in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina. So we're a lot of we're the tech hub one of the tech hubs of the US is. And there is a 3-person company who believes they will be the first tech unicorn, so $1 billion valuation with less than 10 employees.
Wow.
And so the possibilities that AI make available to us are absolutely incredible. But like all technology, it will benefit those who are open to it, who embrace it, who are excited about it. And this goes back to resilience. Like, am I seeing this thing emerging on the horizon and thinking, uh-oh, that's something to be afraid of? Or am I looking at it and saying, okay, what's it making possible? What's it making available? I'm not I recognize some of the problems with AI, particularly around power usage and all the power it's going to require to make AI work. But to me, that's also another opportunity to say, okay, let's step up our thinking about renewables. Let's step up our thinking about new sources of energy, new ways of powering the things we do. To me, anytime there's a downturn in something, it also creates a market opportunity. I've got a client right now from a government agency, a U.S. government agency. I won't name them because I don't want to take away their anonymity, but they're looking and saying, wow, all these jobs are being lost. What can we do? And going over an inventory of this individual's resume, they could start 5 different companies if they wanted to. And that's actually what we're working on. So they're working on starting a company. So I think what artificial intelligence is making possible is the ability for single operators, solopreneurs, whatever you want to call them, to really make a market impact and to build a genuine business without having to bring on a lot of extra people. I think the net positive will be that it will create all kinds of new opportunities for entrepreneurs and so on.
I agree. And I think that's not to even start to mention the impacts on the medical care, like, and, vaccines and like things like, I mean, I've heard people speak about it's highly likely most diseases, most cancers will have a cure in the next sort of like, is it 10 years or something like that? And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
heard somebody speak about basically as long as you're not unlucky and get hit by a bus or whatever, it'll be pretty standard that we're all living till 100 because of things like artificial intelligence and the role that's going to play. It's just incredible and so exciting. And like you say, as with everything that disrupts, it's a fantastic, incredible opportunity for those who are open to use it, to embrace it, to learn about it. That's the key
Right.
thing. I guess the other side of me does question how far will it go, and that's the fear side
Sure.
of, might be amazing 5, 10 years from now, but what does 30 years of AI continuing to develop and 40 years? We all might be able to live till 120, but if AI kills us and, and takes over, it didn't really work, did it?
Sure.
So, but none of us know, right? It's the unknown, and as with everything, it kind of brings us full circle. Focus on what you can control. Be mindful of the story you're telling yourself internally,
Mhm.
and embrace the opportunity and see the upside, right? And leverage that.
Yeah. 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 And look through life, look at life with a lens of creativity and curiosity as well,
Mm,
which I see many of the people I read who are fearful of AI um, haven't necessarily been curious about the possibilities of it.
mm,
They've seen the negative, and there are plenty of negatives. I'm not like some kind of false-eyed optimist on AI. There are plenty of things that we should be aware of and be careful of. But I also think it presents just an incredible opportunity, especially for people to begin to take control over their own lives. So my partner in life, my wife, is a music and art educator, and just asking AI to think creatively about how to put some new lessons together. How do you combine music and art with social emotional learning and all that? It's just been a real
amazing.
godsend for her. So I think again, it just like any technology, it has to do with how we think about it and approach it.
Yeah, I think this is such a key point. Like we've heard people speak about for years because of the internet, and then in particular because of social media. We've heard people like you, Gary Vaynerchuk's of the world, speaking about it has never been easier to make money. It's never been easier to be an entrepreneur, and we don't all have to be the next millionaires, billionaires, but like to make 120,000 a year or whatever, like
Yeah,
most average, ordinary, normal people that don't have a big rags to riches story or whatever can do that. And it has never been easier. And I think now with artificial intelligence, it really has never, like, why are
absolutely.
you not making money, people? Like,
Absolutely.
you've got
Yeah.
all, like, can you imagine telling somebody in 1945 or 1950 that it's really hard to make money and build a business when you've got artificial intelligence? Like, people really need to
Absolutely.
wake up. Especially, it comes back to the resilience again, the excuse making. You are living in the most incredible time of abundance and opportunity. And if you don't see that and if you don't act on that, especially if you're listening to this right now, then you really have only got yourself to blame, in my opinion. Will, there's so much I want to ask you, but let's go to the general life questions that I ask all guests on this show. So here we go. So the first one is, what is some of the best advice you've received in your life and why was it?
Ah, the absolute best advice I received in my life was the advice I received in the recovery process, which is you're only responsible for today, and you're really only responsible for the next right thing. Um, you know, I had this view of, I had to solve kind of everything at once. And so I threw so much against my career and achieved great things. I mean, don't, my resume looked good. Um, but I think when we take ourselves out of the view that we need to solve every problem. One, I have a tattoo on my left arm. It's the Latin phrase "festina lente," and it means "make haste slowly." I think when we're willing to instead of say, "Oh my gosh, how am I going to solve the next quarter of problems?" say, what's the next right thing I'm supposed to do and how do I do that well? And that can add up to a day done well, which eventually adds up to weeks and months and years done well. This is old Stoic philosophy, but I find it still valuable.
Mhm. Beautiful. All right. Flip side is what's some of it might have been well intentioned and well meaning, but actually some bad advice, some of the worst advice you've received, and why did it turn out to be bad?
the the worst advice I received was um, only learn what's going to make you money. Absolute hands down worst advice I ever received. Only learn what's going to make you money, because what I find in my own work, what I find in the executives and the entrepreneurs and even the organizations that I work with is that the really successful people are just super curious. They're reading across a variety of disciplines. They're looking at a lot of different information. And so, look, there are still jobs in this world that require very deep siloed expertise. Like, I want my accountant to be just really brilliant on tax law. But even there, like thinking creatively, it can open up a variety of possibilities for us in ways of thinking. And it is that creative problem thinker that can solve a variety of problems, technical, financial, legal, HR related. So just don't, probably, yeah, the worst advice I ever received was focus on what's going to make you money. And some of my best ideas have come from some really obscure sources.
Right, and then they've probably made you more money as a byproduct, right? By not.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right, interested. Okay, the next one, if you're happy to share, this is a question based on the idea that I think quite often when we listen to podcasts like this and we listen to experts like yourself, we put that expert on a pedestal, and then we can often feel like, well, they've got all their stuff sorted out and they're perfect human being, and and obviously we know that's not true. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
We're all human, and there's that thing for every level. There's another devil, and there's always challenges and so on. So if you're happy to share, the question is, what is something right now that you're finding challenging, and
Mm.
importantly, how are you working through it? How are you overcoming it?
Yes. The biggest challenge I am facing right now is around audience building. So I know, after a number of years of doing this, I know how to find my client base. And so I can find coaching clients, I can find organizations. But going back to my obituary, one of my goals is to really move the world more toward interdependence. And the only way I know to do that is to write more about it, speak more about it. And one of the challenges right now in the broadly speaking sort of the content creator space is that the best way to succeed as a content creator is to find a new and innovative way to tell people what they already believe. But if by contrast you're saying no, you really, you need to think about interdependence. You need to think about how do you leave a better world behind. Don't focus on, how do you get, 10,000 followers on LinkedIn in 3 months? How do you instead leave a world of substance behind? It's a little harder to find an audience for that. And so if I'm being super candid with you, that's probably the biggest struggle I'm facing right now is, um, the way I have found it works for me and the way I've found it works in my clients' lives as well is really to be more purposeful, to take time, to take that festina lente approach, like making haste slowly. But what tends to sell on the internet is 5 steps to this and 6 easy ways to that and 10 weeks to this. And so it's a little more challenging for me in terms of building audience.
Yeah, I think there's something in that. Sell them what they want and then give them what they need. It's that thing, isn't
Yes,
it, about being able to
absolutely.
market it in a certain way that gets their attention, but then still
Yep,
delivers them what they actually need, which is actually it's going to probably take a bit longer than you expected, but you're
precisely.
in now. Let's do the work. All right.
Mhm.
The main kind of mission of this podcast is to help people live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. So, if you was to leave the listeners today with 3 pieces of advice that if they was to follow these, if you want to call it these pieces of guidance, that you believe would generally mean they're going to live a happy life, a healthy life, and a fulfilled life, what 3 truths could you give us?
So I'll leave the audience with 3 questions that I ask myself in virtually every situation, because oftentimes things happen and we feel like we're helpless around it. And these are 3 questions that I learned to ask through my own journey. One is, what can I learn? So anytime something happens, if you believe fundamentally that the world is good and is aligned for your goodness, there's something for you to learn, even if it's not, even if it was something out of your control or something you really didn't want to have happen. And then the second question is, how can I be grateful? Because when we begin to perceive everything that happens to us from a perspective of gratitude, that changes our thoughts on it. And then the third and really the most important question is, how can I help? Oftentimes, when we are struggling with something, we feel helpless and we feel like it has happened to us. But going back to agency, we always have agency, we always have control.
Brilliant. This has been absolutely fantastic, and I'm mindful we want to make time for the members Q&A. But just before we finish the main podcast, if people want to connect with you, if they want to get more of your work, where's the best places to direct them?
Yep. So easiest is just willsamson.com. And there is a Scottish folk singer named Will Samson. He always tries to buy my domain. And it's spelled exactly like that. It's Samson without a P. So it's just willsamson.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn, which is where I post most of my content. I'm on Substack and I have my own podcast as well. But if you go to either of those 2 places, you'll find me and you'll be able to find the rest of my content on the internet.
Fantastic. And do go check out Will and go listen to your podcast. What's the podcast called?
Mission Driven You. It is
Beautiful.
a podcast for people who want to do good and to do well in the world.
Sounds incredible. Will, final question is, what is your personal definition of success?
My personal definition of success is the continued exploration of what will leave a better world behind. That's it. It's really simple. Every day I try to ask myself that question. Did my actions today contribute to a better world for future generations?
Well, I can confidently say I think today they definitely have done. So thank you so much for this,
Thank
Will.
you.
This has been brilliant.